Hello, you are listening to Germantown Community Radio WRGU 92.9 FM. Welcome to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show, a weekly radio program that spotlights positive real estate development and neighborhood revitalization throughout the city of brotherly love. I'm your host, Derek Hengemil. Jumpstart Philly is a unique community development program that trains, mentors, networks, and provides funding to aspiring real estate developers in 7 different Philadelphia neighborhoods, including Germantown, where the program was founded. Jumpstart believes that you can do well by doing good and focuses on removing neighborhood blight, scattered site rehab, creating a healthy mix of affordable and market rate housing, and avoiding gentrification through slow, steady growth and keeping wealth local. Interviews are conducted during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jumpinar series on Monday nights at 7 p.m., held via Zoom webinar. For more information about these events, check out the events page at jumpstartgermantown.com. This week, I am speaking with Angel Rodriguez, who is the Senior Vice President of Land Services at PHDC and Executive Director of the Philadelphia Land Bank. We'll be discussing how to acquire city-owned property. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and be sure to check out the podcast version of this program at jumpstartgermantown.com/media. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to introduce Angel Rodriguez. Angel, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So we have a lot to cover, and I know it's quite a big topic, so let's go ahead and jump right into it, and maybe you can tell us just some brief history of the land bank and tell me a little bit about what city-owned property is.
Okay, so history of the land bank. Couple of milestones that or significant dates that everybody should be aware of with the land bank. The land bank in Pennsylvania, or the Land Bank Act, was authorized through the PA state legislature in 2012. It was then followed up by local legislation that was introduced by Councilwoman Quinona Sanchez, Council President Clark, Councilman Jones, and then Councilman Green. It was passed unanimously by the City Council, and then Mayor Nutter signed it into law, basically, in December 2013. And for everybody who likes to read Philadelphia code, that's covered under Section 16700, which governs the land bank. A couple of other items that it's really important to understand about the land bank, and also the land bank's history and getting it up to speed and operating. So the first board of directors was inaugurated in December of 2014. So we had the state level legislation in 2012, 2013. We had city legislation, which is required by the Land Bank Act. Then you have your first board in 2014, which was just a board to talk about how to get the land bank up and running. Then you had its first regular board was appointed in September of 2016. Also, there was a strategic plan that was adopted prior to that board in 2015. Now, one thing a lot of people do not recognize or understand is that you have the enabling legislation both on the state level, but also on the municipal level that was passed. There's also another agreement that has to be authorized by the city's administration for the land bank to act. And that would be the memorandum of understanding between the city's revenue department, the school district of Philadelphia, and the land bank. So the school district of Philadelphia and the revenue department represent the 2 taxing agencies in Philadelphia County. So what makes a land bank unique, other than a redevelopment authority, is that the land bank has what's considered a priority bid. So we can exercise that priority bid in sheriff sales, and in essence, no one can enter a counter bid after we've identified a property we wish to acquire. So without that piece of legislation, really what makes the value add of having a land bank doesn't really exist. That didn't get executed. That MOU wasn't executed until October of 2017. So there's a huge gap between the state legislation, city legislation in 2013, and then you got to go move to 2017 before the land bank could actually acquire properties. You have about 5 years in between. Also, I was hired 1 month before that MOU was executed. I was hired in September of 2017. So in a lot of ways, people, during that time period, the land bank was transferring properties. There were there were over 1,200 to 2,000 interagency transfers that were occurring during that time period. I want to say 1,200 actually. So the other thing that was happening is that the land bank, and most of your Jumpstart, alumnus or students will appreciate this. The land bank is a quasi-governmental entity. So that means you have a board, it exists as an entity, but it didn't have staff. So the staff didn't really come on board, and that agreement wasn't really approved until 2017 as well. So we had executive staff. I actually am the sixth executive director of the land bank in as many years. I believe I'm the longest serving executive director of the land bank currently. I'm at third year now. But there were a lot of pieces with the land bank that people did not understand, a lot of legislative and legal issues. The land bank, for the most part, really is a startup and didn't really start being able to act the way it should until 2017.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it kind of went, here and then there's a plateau and then a plateau, and it kind of slowly pieced together. Where is it at now? Where are we at in terms of development in 2020? Is it fully up and running, or is there still work to be done?
The first 2017, 2018, 2019, we did receive general fund allocations. We were acquiring properties and disposing of properties. In terms of the dispositions, we've been ratcheting up every year. Unfortunately, this year, because of COVID, when the pandemic hit, that was really we went we had to stop operating in the office in March of 2020, sorry. And also sheriff sales stopped. So we had about over 100 properties identified for sheriff sale acquisition, which we weren't able to do. Sheriff sales have not resumed. They probably won't resume until 2021. The other item that happened is because of the loss of revenue citywide, the land bank's general is funded out of the general fund. So for fiscal year 21, we did not receive an allocation. So basically on whatever, revenues or dollars we had left over from fiscal year 20, that's what we're operating off of. So for this year, fiscal year 21, we cannot acquire any new properties. As far as dispositions, we're focusing on dispositions and settlements and trying to get more properties out the door.
Okay, great. So it sounds like the future of the land bank is kind of just to recover from the 7 months of uncertainty and get things back up and running again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be we'll see what the future holds in terms of the general fund and where we're at in terms of every year we have to really advocate for general fund allocations for acquisitions and operating.
Gotcha. So before we get into the application process, I just want to get some context on the size of the land bank. How many properties comprise it, and what is the average valuation of those properties? Is there a number you can give us?
I couldn't really give you a valuation, and I'll get into that. But so another thing happened in 2020. 2019 actually, we had a consolidation. So it's really not just the land bank. So I know you introduced me as having, title of Senior Vice President for Land for PHDC. Land operations were consolidated. So we have the land bank inventory, the redevelopment authority's inventory, and we also manage the surplus land for the Department of Public Property. Now there's a difference. The city has active land that they, like parking lots, schools, libraries, and all of that. And then they have surplus residential land, which we manage for the Commissioner of Public Property. All total, we have approximately 8,000 properties in our inventory that we have. So you would call that publicly held inventory or city inventory. So if anybody was looking to acquire a property, it wouldn't really matter what agency it would be in. That would be an internal matter for me to manage. So it could be a mix of redevelopment authority properties and land bank properties, and let's throw in a city property. I would have to follow a couple of different steps and approvals, but it really wouldn't matter to the person applying. The only issue would come in as to timing of disposition or settlement, because some of the steps, some properties are much more involved than others.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
So next up, let's talk about the application process. I'm sure this is what most people in the call here are most excited to hear about. So maybe
Sure.
Just give us, from the very beginning, you hear about city-owned property. What person or what way should someone look to kind of get started with the whole process?
I think the first thing people need to understand is that there are two types of dispositions. So I'm going to use the term disposition, which means selling property. So I dispose of a property to somebody in the public, and that could be an individual, a corporation, developers represented by a corporation, a nonprofit, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit. So there are two types. So the first is by default, and basically our standard operating procedure is that everything is supposed to be sold via a competitive sale. It's either a competitive sale with no requirements, which we do have on our website, and that is phdcphila.org. You can go to the land section.
So what do you mean about competitive sale? What competitive in terms of what?
So a competitive sale basically is something we post. So if you want a property and say you want to develop it for market rate, I have to actually post it for 30 days on our website and allow anyone and everyone to apply, an opportunity to apply. And that's actually part of code. And also the mayor had issued a memorandum in terms of stating that we have to do that. So that's covered under competitive sales, which is usually characterized as one parcel or two parcels that are adjacent that we're going to sell. You can apply for it. We're not requiring a level of affordability, and we'll take whatever application, we'll score it and run it through the process. And then if we accept the application, we'll sell it to that person. Again, there's no requirement for affordability. And then you have the request for proposals, which are typically characterized as bundles of properties. So we'll put out anywhere from 15 to 20 parcels in a geographic area, typically within a 2-block radius. And we'll stipulate a certain percentage of the units created from this RFP will have to be affordable. And we'll determine what that level of affordability is. Affordability in the land bank legislation is that was just passed in 2020 is 120% of AMI all the way down to 30. Now, just to put that in context for your listeners, the median income or 100% of AMI in the Philadelphia MSA as per HUD, it's 96,600. So 120% of AMI is what you're looking at is about 116,000 a year. You start getting into 80% is around 74,000 or 75,000. These are approximations. 60% is around 50, 56. And then you start getting into 30%, which is about 32, 35,000 a year. So depending on the area, we'll set these stipulations as to what we're looking for. So those are competitive sales. How that process goes is we have to post it for 30 days. We take whatever is left, whatever comes in, we'll do a review, and then we'll process that. Now, what's important for your listeners to understand is that there is another way to apply for land that does not require us to do a competitive sale. So a person can ask me, can I, purchase this property? I want to build a market rate property. At that point, I have to tell them, no, you have to wait for me to post it up as competitive sale.
Right.
If a developer comes to me and says, I'd like to do a non-competitive disposition, you have to qualify to get into to be considered a non-competitive disposition. So for non-competitive dispositions, there are certain categories. So a side or rear yard application where an individual is the owner occupant of a property and their name's on the deed. If the city owns a property to the side or to the rear, they can submit an application, and that's considered a non-competitive disposition. They can also, if you're trying to do a community garden or open space, and you are a non-for-profit or a state, an unincorporated non-for-profit, we can dispose to that organization. So that could, there is no residency requirement. It could be a bundle of properties. It could already be used as a community garden, and we're trying to, for lack of a better term, legalize it, like transfer title to this community group. The reason why we talk about the corporate structure is that I have to dispose of the land to an entity, right? Because it is a legal transaction. In which case anybody can, apply for that. Then you have land for business expansion. So if you're a property owner and you're running your business out of your property, and you want to expand your business, if we own property within 1,000 square feet, 1,000 square foot radius of your property, which is a good, it's probably like a city block radius from wherever, we can actually dispose of property to you through a non-competitive process. The next one is an assemblage. Say you've actually purchased properties, purchased land, and we own the adjacent parcel. We'll treat that as long as you own 50% of the land for the total development proposal. That's considered a non-competitive disposition. Then you have proposing land for community uses. So a lot of people want to do, community centers, job training centers, schools, anything like that. You could also propose a development, and that would be considered non-competitive. The other piece, which is new under the new 2020 legislation, is that you can propose an affordable housing project. Now, there are nonprofits that you can either do 100% of affordable. That typically is characterized by, a low-income housing tax credit or something that's funded by the Federal Home Loan Bank, or which is new, which opens it up to for-profit developers. You can propose an affordable project as long as 51% of the units produced are affordable, and which allows you to put a proposal together. It could be, so to give you an example, you can identify 10 lots within an area, and you're saying, okay, I want these 10 lots and 51% of the properties are going to be affordable. That means six out of the 10 have to be affordable. And you would have to do that. Now, just so, and I assume you covered this in your Jumpstart program, developers really have to pay attention to the zoning.
Yes.
All right. So an RM1 means that you could do units. So remember, I said the requirement is the number of units yielded. So if you have 4 parcels that are RM1, and let's say you could do 12, right? That's 7 units. If it's RSA 5, you're talking about home ownership and single units. You're going to have to do 6 affordable houses. Again, the other thing that they should understand is that you can apply for a rental project. So if your business model is to buy and hold and you want to rent it, you can do that. If you want to do home ownership, you can also do that. The application is structured so it depends on the sophistication of the applicant.
Gotcha.
So go ahead.
Sounds like the first step is to kind of decide which avenue you're going to go down, competitive or non-competitive. And correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I misunderstood, but competitive sounds like it's your go-to for-profit businesses and residential projects, or sort of market rate residential, and then non-competitive. Anything else? Is that right?
True, but admittedly, it's not a high volume.
Gotcha.
Say again?
Which is not a high volume?
Competitive sales and RFPs. It's not like we're constantly posting RFPs,
right,
or competitive sales. The reason why we changed the legislation was to allow people to do their homework and submit an application to us. Mm-hmm. It's much more of it's much more conducive to that self-starter, that developer who is well versed in doing their homework, can put together a pro forma, can sit there, understand the regulations, and know what their capacity is, and really just kind of put together an application, submit it. The other thing is it meets our agenda item. There is such a need for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. So, when you propose an affordable housing project, the other thing that all developers are available is that we can discount the acquisition price. Mm-hmm. So once you're in that milieu and in that group, we then can consider discounting the price of the land. And what I'll say to that is that it really is incumbent on the developer, when they put together their pro forma, to explain why they need that discount. And what we'll do on our end in looking at it is to look at what are we getting for it. So I'll give you an example of something that we wouldn't really appreciate or approve. Mm-hmm. Is if you gave me like 20 SROs, mm-hmm. And you said, oh, we're tackling families. Mm-hmm. Families need bedrooms. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to look at is, okay, this is a bedroom community. This is what we need. We need more 2 bedrooms. We need more 3 bedrooms. We're trying to keep the community intact. So we're going to be looking at that bedroom mix and the level of affordability. The other thing is a lot of, neighborhoods are transitioning very quickly. Mm-hmm. In a 3-year span, you'll see neighborhoods really change and the values change. And we need to preserve a level of affordability in these transitional neighborhoods.
If you're just tuning in, this is an interview with Angel Rodriguez, who is the Senior Vice President of Land Services at PHDC and the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Land Bank. We're talking about how to acquire city-owned property. Thanks for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. I hope you're enjoying our discussion. Gotcha. Great. So depending on what option you're choosing, or which route works best for you, competitive or non-competitive, do you apply at the same place? Is there 2 spots where you apply, or you referenced the application a little bit? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can kind of give people the directions to where, now that they
sure.
And what type of application they're submitting, how do they actually submit it?
Sure. So when you want to submit, you want to go to PHDC, phila.org/land /buy land, buy BUY-LAND. All right. When you land on this page, you're going to see all the options that I talked about. So you're going to see side yards, community gardens, proposed affordable housing, land for business expansion, assemblage, and community use. And also if you want to, so these are all non-competitive applications. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking to do that, you would, click the hyperlink on either whatever box you want to do. And then it walks you through how to get to an application. So you can download the application and financial worksheet online, and the instructions are part of it. The application is a fillable PDF. For those of you who are thinking about side and rear yards, there is a screener. So you have to answer certain screener questions like, are you up on your taxes? Do you live in the property? Is your name on the deed? And also there's a GIS map. All of these links will lead you to a GIS map as well that will allow you to do your research to see if the property is owned and available. Now, the reason why I bring up owned and available, not all of the properties that we have in our inventory are available for sale. We have areas that are designated only for affordable housing, where we will not accept applications for side yards or community gardens, mainly because we're trying to preserve affordable housing. It does take a lot longer to get those, get that capital stack together, or to actually get that type of project up and running. Right. Other areas, go ahead.
Before we move on, I just want to tell everybody I put the link to that buy land page in chat so everybody can check it out and kind of follow along as Angel's explaining through here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you mentioned the GIS service. Is it Atlas that it directs you to, or is it something else?
No, it's a GIS. We have our own GIS map that we identify. It's tied to our database of owned and available properties. When you go to it, it does have a hyperlink in that when you select a property, a pop-up will show. And if you want more info, that will take you to Atlas.
Gotcha.
And then on Atlas, I'm assuming that in your curriculum you covered this, there's a wealth of information there. It's like who owns the property, when was it sold, more importantly, deeds, any L&I violations.
Great.
And those types of things.
So will you be able, but there's no information about whether the property is for sale through the land bank on Atlas, right? So people shouldn't be looking there for that? Or
on Atlas, it'll show ownership. So if the land bank, the redevelopment authority, or the city of Philadelphia owns it, or PHDC, if you want to purchase it, you're coming to this website. So this website manages anything that's owned and available for all publicly held properties from those 4 agencies.
Great. So sorry I interrupted you, but I think you left out that you're choosing which type of this
right. So once you do that and you go through the screener questions, you identify it. What you're going to do is you're going to fill out an application. Word of advice. I cannot tell you how many people think they're submitting an application and forget to upload the PDF file and the you're laughing, but it's really, people get very upset.
I'm laughing because we also get a lot of loan applications, and it's the same sort of problem. It's like
right.
What you want to do is make sure it's the actual application.
Right. So we'll get the contact information, but they forget to upload the application. So just a reminder to everybody, you need to upload the actual application, all of the attachments that are required, and we need the financial worksheet. You also have to make sure that you signed everything in the application. There are at least 5 or 6 areas where you have to sign for us to consider that a completed application. So let's jump forward. Say you did all that. You uploaded the application. Under the statute and legislation, we have 120 days to get through the applications. Because of the COVID pandemic, there's a legal memorandum on our website that talks about the timelines are told because we're operating under an emergency order from the governor. What that means is that these timelines are not really in effect, only because I have to have my staff operating from home and from the office. I have them coming in and coming out. It's rather difficult, obviously, as you can understand, with security with servers, and there's a lot of sensitive information. So it does create a problem for us in terms of how quick we can process applications and the volume that we get. So let's assume you selected your property, you put your property in, you give it to us. We do two forms of reviews. We do a threshold review, which is basically we're making sure that it's a complete application and that we can consider the applicant a qualified applicant. A qualified applicant is a person who doesn't owe the city any back taxes, is up on all their obligations, and there are no issues. We can get a clean tax certification. Also, for other developers who may have other entities that do business in Philadelphia, all of the businesses that you own and all of the properties that you own have to be current on their taxes and obligations. So if you owe the water or something like that, we can't do business with you. So it really makes sense. You have to make sure you're complete. The next thing, go ahead.
You just ask you a situation if somebody submits the application and it gets to that stage, and then you let them know, hey, sorry, you didn't pay this bill or didn't pay this tax. Do they have to wait and then submit a new application, or do you keep that on file until the problem is resolved? Or
no, we close that application out. They have to resubmit.
Gotcha.
So because, all right, while revenue is a city agency, I have no authority over there. That's private information. They will not tell me. All I'm told and my staff are told are that this person's not tax compliant.
Okay.
So once that happens, it's incumbent on the applicant to go and deal with that with the revenue department. I just had a meeting today with some very seasoned developers who for 4 months have not gotten a clearance, even though they can prove they paid everything. They're just not getting the response. And without that response from revenue, I can't move forward.
Sure.
So
it sounds like the heat on the side of caution, it's rather than trying to get the application 3 over times, it's make sure everything's right the first time you do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also one thing I'd like to point out, if you plan on as a developer to create a new entity, you can create that new entity. We'll dispose to the new entity as long as the entity is going to get a clean tax cert. Typically, what developers will forget to do is register the new entity with the revenue department. So what I get is, well, it's a new entity. How does it owe taxes? It doesn't. But the revenue department, if they think you don't exist or you're not in their database, they assume you're tax delinquent.
Right.
So I always caution people, if you're going to create a new company, make sure you file it and register it with the revenue department. Okay. So after we do that review, we actually, like for developments, we actually score it. And that's in the new legislation. So we have a scoring criteria that's in the legislation. That's also in the disposition policy for 2020. It's on the website and you can download it. I suggest everybody do that. We will score it. You have to score over 65 points for it to move forward. Once it's moved forward, we will draft what's called a purchase development agreement. For the redevelopment authority, it's called a redevelopers agreement because they're governed under urban renewal law. That is presented to the developer or the applicant, and they have 30 days, 30 to 45 days. 45 days is for the for a nonprofit, because most times, if a nonprofit has to execute the PDA, they need a board resolution, so we give them extra time. For LLCs, individuals, and all that, you have 30 days. You have to respond in 30 days. And if you can't respond in 30 days, say you're going back and forth with your attorney, or you have some questions and things like that, you have to request an extension. If it's day 30 and you're telling me, oh, I need another 30 days, we're going to terminate the agreement. So you have to be very, we're looking for a response. If we get to the point where we're giving you this agreement, please do your due diligence, respond, and we'll get back and forth. We do offer extensions, but again, that's predicated on communication. The applicant has to sign it's not fully executed, but they sign it. Once it's signed, We will then take it to the next available board meeting, and the board meetings are whichever, like who holds title. So land bank owned properties go to the land bank. City owned properties, and this is what's interesting, actually get presented at the redevelopment authorities board meeting. But it's approved by the commissioner. PRA properties obviously go to PRA's board. There is an additional step with redevelopment authority. If it's in an urban renewal area, model cities area, or any area in the city that's covered under a blight certification, it has to go to the planning commission first. And the planning commission would have to approve it, and that's for side yards as well. Has to approve it, and then it goes to the redevelopment authority board. So there's an added step. Let's assume that the board approves it. Then we will send it to city council for approval. City council has 60 days basically to introduce the legislation. They don't have to. I just want to put that out there. We'll send it to them. We'll have conversation with the staff. We're saying we're recommending this project. But if council does not submit the resolution within 60 days under the new legislation, we would terminate the agreement. So just so I can clarify for everybody, it's state law that local municipalities have to approve the disposition of publicly held land. It's not unique to Philadelphia. That's across any county. They have to approve it. So without that approval, I cannot sell a parcel of land. All right. So one of the, in terms of business management, you really want to have a strong relationship with your local council person. After that, after city council approval, I sign the agreement and then it's fully executed. From there, we move towards settlement. With settlement, title reports are pulled. We clear title. Usually we are obligated to provide free and clear title. Typically, and we're working this out with the revenue department, sometimes what holds up settlement is we'll get a title report and the water department's assessing, stormwater fees that they're not supposed to. Right. So we have to clear that up. And sometimes we'll have it cleared 1 month. Title company's not ready to go. We get assessed with another. So I've had situations where I've had to clear them 3 times. It's really frustrating. We're working with the water department to make sure that we don't get that. But this is part of that interagency piece that will take a little bit longer. The other thing is, when I had mentioned, once the applicant signs the redevelopment agreement, if you need to get to zoning because you're getting a variance, and I'm assuming you covered this also in your classes, that most of Philadelphia are made up of non-conforming lots. So the planning commission in the zoning code, a buildable lot is 1,440 square feet. Most lots in Philadelphia on small streets are about 750, 850. So if you're going to build on that lot, you have to go to zoning and get a variance for, just because. That usually depends, could add 4 to 6 months on your application. Right. So typically, once you've agreed to the purchase development agreement, we'll give you a letter that allows you to go pull your building permits. We'll allow you to go to zoning and put your zoning application in. We will work with you and get you a license agreement so that you can do your geotech, which, just so everybody's aware, geotech is required for all building permits. If it's a large scale development, it's a requirement, especially because you're going to have to deal with the water department. If you're doing any kind of, development, like say 5 to 10 parcels, let's say 10 parcels or bigger probably, depending on land mass, so we'll allow you to do that so it doesn't hold you up. And then once we go to settlement, typically we give 18 months for construction. You will be monitored. We will have inspectors that go out periodically. We do site visits. More than happy to go visit. I visit a lot of developers and their projects. It's really interesting to see how they're, what they're coming up with. And then once you're done, we issue a certificate of completion. That is separate and apart from your certificate of occupancy. Certificate of occupancy is given by the L&I department. The certificate of completion, just to put it in the right context for everybody, that means you've met all the obligations under our development agreement. So the development agreement, when we go to settlement, we record the deed, and the deed will typically have a restriction, which is either for affordability or whatever. And we also record the development agreement. Mm-hmm. So you're going to need that certificate of completion so that, for financing and everything. So we'll work with you on that as well. And then at that point, it's project closeout. On affordable projects, there is a minimum limit of 15 years of affordability that we put in terms of a declaration of a covenant that we'll put on the property. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great. Yeah. Well, it's a big.
Okay.
No, that was great, and you really covered a lot. And we have another minute or two before we're going to move into Q&A here. But I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier that the seemingly obvious common mistake on applications is not uploading the actual application or not attaching something you're required to.
Right.
Any other quick tips or tricks you can give people for their applications? Something that'll make your life easier, or your staff's life easier, and in turn, the developer's life easier.
We actually spend a lot of time on the application. The application has a checklist. Okay. Go through the checklist.
Right.
So a lot of times what I'll tell people is that, I'm a former contractor. I've worked in nonprofits. I wrote a lot of grants. Grant writing, this is like grant writing or business plan writing. Mm-hmm. It's a skill. It's a separate skill from being able to manage a job, a job site. It's a different skill from doing finance or budgeting. You really have to understand how to package an application and not miss anything. So typically what I tell people to do is read the application 10 times.
Great.
And then after you're done, read your application. Don't be in such a all-fired rush to put it in. You have time if as long as it's not an RFP, just get it done, do a once over, walk away, and then pick it up the next day and go through it and make sure you're checking everything off. And please make sure you sign everything.
That concludes my conversation with Angel Rodriguez from PHDC about how to acquire city-owned property. I hope you learned a little bit more about positive real estate development. Next week, I'll be discussing the Conservatorship Act with Richard Vanderslice, an attorney, and how it applies to real estate developers. The interviews on this program are recorded during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jumpinar series, which takes place via Zoom webinar every Monday night at 7 p.m. If you'd like to participate in the live Q&A with our guest, be sure to head to jumpstartgermantown.com/events and register for next week's Jumpinar. And if you're interested in starting a Jumpstart program in your own community, visit gojumpstart.org to see our how-to guide and our open source training workbook. Thanks so much for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. And be sure to tune in next week.